I stared at my phone in disbelief, reading the message from my son Jack that had just appeared after 3 years of silence. "Mom, could you sell your new apartment to help my wife?" My hands trembled as I sat alone in my living room, the morning sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the bay. 3 years without a call, a visit, or even a birthday card. 3 years of heartache since the divorce from their father. And now, just hours after my sister Paula posted photos of my new luxury apartment online, suddenly my son remembered I existed. The timing made everything painfully clear. I used to believe family meant forever. For 35 years, I poured everything into being a wife to Richard and mother to Jack and Amanda. I can still remember the day Jack was born, how I counted his tiny fingers and toes, making silent promises about the kind of mother I would be. 3 years later, Amanda arrived, and our family felt complete. I loved watching their personalities develop. Jack was always the serious one, thoughtful and methodical like his father, while Amanda burst with creativity and laughter. When they were young, we were inseparable. I was room mother for their classes, drove them to soccer practices, ballet lessons, and scout meetings. I helped with science projects, baked cookies for fundraisers, and stayed up late helping with homework. Richard was building his law practice during those years, working 60-hour weeks to establish himself at one of the most prestigious firms in the city. I had put my own career in marketing on hold, agreeing it made sense for one of us to be fully present for the children. "You can always go back to work when they're older," Richard would say. And I believed him, content with the role I'd chosen. The children and I created our own little world during those days, filled with inside jokes and family traditions. Every Sunday was pancake day, with each child taking turns choosing the special ingredient of the week. Summers meant camping trips to Lake Wilson, where we'd tell ghost stories around the campfire and fall asleep counting stars. As Jack and Amanda grew into teenagers, things changed as they naturally do. There were more friends, activities, and less time for family pancake Sundays, but we remained close. They still confided in me, sought my advice, and seemed to value our relationship. I was proud of the adults they were becoming. Jack followed his father into law, while Amanda pursued a career in graphic design. I cheered at their college graduations with tears in my eyes, certain that I'd done something right in this world. When Jack met Melissa during his final year of law school, I was thrilled for him. She was smart and ambitious, if a little reserved around me. 2 years later, Amanda introduced us to Daniel, a financial analyst with a winning smile and firm handshake. I welcomed them both into our family with open arms, hosting engagement parties and throwing myself into wedding planning with enthusiasm. The first holidays after both children were married revealed a shift I wasn't prepared for. Thanksgiving had always been at our house, but Melissa's mother insisted they come to her family's celebration instead. "It's really important to her, Mom," Jack explained apologetically. "Maybe we can come for dessert?" They never showed up. Amanda and Daniel split the day between our house and his family, arriving stressed and leaving early. By the 3rd year of this new normal, both sets of in-laws seemed to have claimed ownership of my children's time. Phone calls became shorter and less frequent. Invitations were declined more often than accepted. Richard seemed unbothered by the change, burying himself in work as he always had. The Christmas 5 years ago was when I truly felt the loss. Both children had called with nearly identical excuses about why they couldn't make it to our traditional Christmas Eve dinner. Jack and Melissa were spending the holiday with her family in Vermont. Amanda and Daniel were joining his parents on a cruise. For the first time, Richard and I would be alone for the holidays. I tried to hide my disappointment, decorating the house as always, and preparing a scaled-down feast for 2. Richard seemed distracted throughout dinner, checking his phone repeatedly. As I served the pumpkin pie he'd always loved, he set down his fork and looked at me directly for what felt like the first time in years. "Erika, I want a divorce," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "Jennifer and I have been seeing each other for the past 4 years, and now that the children are settled with their own lives, there's no reason to continue this charade." Jennifer, his secretary, 26 years old. I've stayed this long because it seemed important for the children to have a stable home, he continued as I sat frozen in shock. But they have their own families now, and you. Well, you've served your purpose. We both deserve a chance at happiness in our remaining years, don't you think? Served my purpose. Like an appliance that had outlived its usefulness. 35 years of marriage dismissed in a single phrase. The divorce was ugly and swift. Richard had apparently been preparing for years, hiding assets and consulting with the best divorce attorneys in the city, many of whom were former colleagues or golfing buddies. I was blindsided, struggling to find representation as one lawyer after another declined due to conflicts of interest. By the time it was finalized 6 months later, I had lost our family home, access to most of our savings, and worst of all, the support of my children. Richard had crafted a narrative that portrayed me as greedy and unreasonable, demanding excessive alimony despite his generous settlement offer. "Mom, why are you doing this to Dad?" Amanda had asked during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. "He says you're trying to take everything he's worked for all these years." "That's not true," I tried to explain. "I'm only asking for what's fair after 35 years. But he says you're demanding half of his business. The business he built while you were just at home." Just at home. The words stung, revealing how little value they placed on the decades I'd spent raising them. Jack was even more direct in his condemnation. "Dad showed me the settlement offer," he said, his voice cold with disapproval. "It's excessive, Mom, and you know it. As a lawyer, I'm telling you, no judge will award you what you're asking." I tried to explain that I hadn't seen any offer, that my attorney was still trying to get full financial disclosure, but Jack wasn't interested in my side. By the time the divorce was finalized, both my children had essentially stopped speaking to me. Holiday invitations ceased. Birthday calls went unmade. I sent gifts that were acknowledged with brief, formal texts, if at all. At 65 years old, I found myself alone in a small one-bedroom apartment I could barely afford, having sold my wedding ring to cover the security deposit. The settlement had provided just enough for me to survive, but not enough to live comfortably, especially in our expensive city. Richard had successfully argued that I was capable of working and therefore didn't need substantial support. So, I began applying for jobs, armed with a marketing degree that was nearly 4 decades old and no recent work experience. The rejection was universal and often humiliating. "We're looking for someone with more current experience," they would say. Or, "I'm not sure you'd be a good culture fit with our young team." One interviewer, a man half my age, suggested I might be more comfortable volunteering somewhere. Through it all, my sister Paula became my lifeline. 5 years younger and happily divorced herself, she lived 2 hours away, but called daily and visited whenever she could. "You need to fight, Erika," she insisted during one of her weekend visits. "Richard took your past, but he doesn't get to take your future too." With Paula's encouragement, I expanded my job search and finally found an opportunity with Silver Lining Marketing, a mid-sized firm with a reputation for valuing mature workers. They offered me an entry-level position at a modest salary, and I accepted gratefully. Those first months were difficult. I felt obsolete among colleagues who could navigate digital platforms I'd never heard of. My supervisor, Tanya, was younger than Jack, but treated me with respect and patience as I struggled to catch up. Slowly, I began to find my footing, drawing on decades of real-life experience that my younger colleagues lacked. Throughout this time, I continued reaching out to Jack and Amanda. I sent text messages about my new job, email updates about my life, and voice messages on birthdays and holidays. The responses, when they came at all, were perfunctory. "Glad you're doing well. Thanks for the birthday wishes." Never questions about my life or invitations to connect. I was scrolling through Facebook one evening, something I rarely did anymore, when I saw it. Richard, beaming beside Jennifer, his hand resting on her very pregnant belly. The caption read, "It's a boy. Richard and Jen can't wait to welcome baby Thomas in August." The photo had dozens of comments, including congratulatory messages from both Jack and Amanda. My son and daughter were going to have a half-brother, and neither had thought to mention it to me. Worse still, as I painfully clicked through to Richard's profile, I discovered photos from the gender reveal party. There were Jack and Melissa, Amanda and Daniel, all smiling alongside Richard and his new wife, champagne glasses raised in celebration. A new family portrait from which I had been neatly excised. I threw myself into work after that discovery, determined to build something meaningful in this new chapter of my life. To my surprise, I began to excel. My years of organizing family life had given me exceptional project management skills. My decades of navigating social dynamics as a corporate wife translated into an intuitive understanding of client relationships. And my age, which had been such a liability during my job search, became an unexpected asset when working with senior clients who appreciated dealing with someone their own age. Within 18 months, I had been promoted twice, moving from administrative assistant to account coordinator to junior account manager. My salary increased accordingly, allowing me to move to a slightly better apartment and begin rebuilding my savings. For the first time since the divorce, I felt a glimmer of hope for my future. My 50-year high school reunion arrived during this period of cautious optimism. I debated attending, unsure if I wanted to face old friends who might ask about Richard or my children. Paula insisted I go. "Wear that new blue dress that brings out your eyes," she said firmly. "Hold your head high. You have nothing to be ashamed of." The reunion proved to be unexpectedly affirming. Many of my former classmates were also divorced or widowed, rebuilding lives they never expected to have. Several were working well into their 60s and 70s, not just for financial reasons, but because they found meaning in their careers. I reconnected with my old friend Diane, now a widow running her late husband's insurance agency, and we began meeting monthly for lunch. At work, I proposed a new initiative targeting senior consumers, a demographic often overlooked in digital marketing strategies. To my delight, the company's leadership embraced the idea and put me in charge of developing it. The campaign launched 6 months later to significant success, bringing in several major clients and considerable revenue. On the morning of my 68th birthday, my boss Sandra called me into her office. I assumed she wanted to discuss the quarterly results from my senior outreach program. Instead, she offered me a director position at the company's branch office in Portland, Oregon. The role came with a substantial salary increase, relocation assistance, and an opportunity to build a department from the ground up. "We need someone with your insight and experience," Sandra explained. "The Portland office is expanding, and your work with senior demographics has opened up markets we didn't know existed." I sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of the offer. Director, a 6-figure salary, a chance to start fresh in a new city. "I know it's a big move at this stage of life," Sandra continued, misinterpreting my silence. "Take a few days to think about it." I didn't need days. What was keeping me here? My children barely acknowledged my existence. Richard had his new family. Even Paula had recently started talking about moving to Arizona for her arthritis. "I'll take it," I said firmly. "When do I start?" The move to Portland happened quickly. I sold most of my furniture, packed the few meaningful possessions I'd managed to keep in the divorce, and flew west to begin my new life. The company had arranged a temporary furnished apartment while I looked for a permanent home. Portland was nothing like my East Coast hometown. It was greener, more casual, with a vibrancy that surprised and delighted me. The office welcomed me warmly, eager for fresh leadership and ideas. For the first time in years, I felt valued for my contributions rather than dismissed for my age. I found a luxury apartment in a downtown high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River. The rent was steep, but my new salary made it affordable. I furnished it piece by piece, selecting only items that truly spoke to me, rather than the practical, family-friendly choices that had defined my previous home. My living room featured a white sectional sofa Richard would have considered impractical. My bedroom walls were painted a bold teal that would have scandalized our former suburban neighbors. Every choice was distinctly, defiantly mine. At work, I built a team that reflected my values of experience and diversity. We quickly established ourselves as innovators within the company, particularly in developing marketing strategies that bridged generational gaps. Under my leadership, the Portland office exceeded revenue targets 3 quarters in a row, earning recognition from the corporate headquarters. I developed new friendships with colleagues and neighbors. I joined a book club, took weekend hiking trips to explore my new state, and even tried dating briefly before deciding I preferred my independence. My life developed a pleasant rhythm, fuller and more satisfying than I had dared to hope after the divorce. Throughout this transformation, I continued to reach out to Jack and Amanda, sending occasional texts about my move and new job. The responses remained minimal. I sent gifts to my grandchildren on birthdays and Christmas, usually acknowledged with brief thank you texts clearly written by their parents. I tried not to let the pain of their absence overshadow my new happiness. Paula visited 6 months after my move, marveling at my apartment and new life. "I hardly recognize you," she said as we sipped wine on my balcony overlooking the city lights. "You seem younger somehow, more alive." "I feel that way," I admitted. "Sometimes I wonder who I might have been if I hadn't given everything to Richard and the kids for all those years." Paula's expression darkened. "Speaking of the kids," she said hesitantly, "I ran into Amanda's friend Sarah at the grocery store last week. Apparently, Amanda and Jack have been telling people you abandoned the family after the divorce. That you chose your career over staying close to your grandchildren." The wine turned bitter in my mouth. "That's absurd. They stopped speaking to me, not the other way around. And I've sent countless messages, gifts, offers to visit. They're the ones who pushed me away." "I know," Paula said gently, "but that's not the story they're telling. According to Sarah, they paint you as the villain who walked away from everything to pursue your own selfish interests." I set down my glass, anger and hurt, competing for dominance. After everything I had sacrificed, after all the rejection I had endured, my own children were rewriting history to cast me as the deserter. It was a breathtaking betrayal, yet somehow not entirely surprising. They had chosen their father's narrative from the beginning. Why would they stop now? Paula stayed with me for 2 weeks, and those days were filled with more laughter than I'd experienced in years. We explored Portland together, hiking through Forest Park, sampling local restaurants, and attending a pottery class where we both created laughably lopsided bowls. In the evenings, we talked for hours, making up for years of distance when my life had revolved exclusively around Richard and the children. "You know what I love about your place?" Paula said one evening as we relaxed in my living room. "It's so completely you. Not a hint of Richard's stuffy taste anywhere." I looked around at the contemporary furniture, the abstract art I'd chosen simply because the colors made me happy, the bookshelves filled with novels Richard would have dismissed as frivolous. "I never knew I had taste of my own," I admitted. "For so long, everything was chosen to please Richard or accommodate the children. This is the first space that's truly mine." "Can I take some photos?" Paula asked suddenly. "My book club won't believe how fabulous my big sister is living. The Erika they've heard about in my stories is the suburban mom, not this sophisticated career woman with the view to die for." I laughed and agreed, watching as she snapped pictures of my living room, the kitchen with its gleaming countertops, and the view from my balcony. She even insisted on taking a photo of me against the backdrop of the river and city lights, the Space Needle visible in the distance. "Do you mind if I post these on Facebook?" she asked. "I want to show you off a little." I hesitated briefly, thinking of Jack and Amanda. Would seeing my new life hurt them? But then I remembered Paula's revelation about the narrative they'd been spreading. Perhaps it was time they saw the truth. "Go ahead," I said. "I have nothing to hide." The next morning, I woke to a flurry of notifications on my rarely used Facebook account. Paula's album, titled "Visiting My Amazing Sister in Her Portland Paradise," had attracted dozens of comments and likes. Old neighbors, distant cousins, and mutual friends expressed surprise and delight at my apparent transformation. "Erika, the apartment is stunning," wrote my college roommate. "Who knew retirement could look this good?" commented a former neighbor. "Tell us your secret for reinventing yourself after 65, demanded a cousin. I smiled as I scrolled through the messages, touched by the warm responses. Paula had captured the apartment beautifully, making it look even more impressive than it felt to me now that I was used to it. The final photo in the album, showing me on the balcony with the city lights twinkling behind me, had attracted the most comments. I had to admit I looked good, confident, happy. A far cry from the broken woman who had sold her wedding ring to pay rent 3 years ago. My phone buzzed with a text notification. My heart jumped when I saw it was from Jack. After nearly 3 years of silence, broken only by obligatory holiday acknowledgments, my son was reaching out. For a moment, hope flared. Perhaps seeing me happy and successful had reminded him of our once close relationship. Maybe this was the first step toward reconciliation. Then I read the message. Mom, could you sell your new apartment to help my wife? Melissa wants to start a business, and we need capital. Let me know. No greeting, no acknowledgement of our estrangement, not even a question about my new life or career, just a request for money, as though I were nothing more than an ATM he'd suddenly remembered existed. I stared at the message until the screen went dark, unable to formulate a response. 3 years of silence, and this was what prompted him to reach out? Not concern for my well-being, not a desire to repair our relationship, but the sight of an asset he thought he could claim. Before I could decide how to respond, another notification appeared. An email from Amanda. The subject line read, "Your apartment." My daughter, too, had apparently been inspired to reconnect by the sight of my financial situation rather than familial love. I left both messages unanswered and went to work, trying to focus on the marketing presentation I was scheduled to deliver that afternoon. But my children's mercenary responses to Paula's photos haunted me, tainting what should have been a moment of pride in how far I'd come. That evening, as I sat alone on my balcony watching the sunset reflect off the river, my phone rang. Amanda's name flashed on the screen. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Mom? Is that you?" Her voice sounded exactly as I remembered, sending a wave of longing through me despite my anger. "Yes, Amanda, it's me." "Oh, I wasn't sure you'd pick up. It's been a while." A while. As if we'd simply been busy, rather than her having systematically ignored my attempts at contact for years. "What can I do for you, Amanda?" I kept my voice neutral, fighting the urge to either lash out in hurt or collapse in relief at finally hearing her voice. "I saw Aunt Paula's pictures of your apartment. It's really something. You never told us you moved to Portland. I sent several messages about the move and my new job. You didn't respond." A pause. "Well, things have been really busy with the kids and everything." I said nothing, waiting. "Anyway," she continued, filling the uncomfortable silence, "I was thinking maybe we could reconnect? Do a video chat sometime? It would be nice for the kids to see their grandmother." The grandchildren she had effectively kept from me for years were suddenly being offered as bait. I closed my eyes against the manipulation. "That would be nice," I said carefully. "I've missed all of you." "Great. How about tomorrow?" "Oh, and I wanted to ask about your apartment too. Jack mentioned you might be selling it?" And there it was. The real reason for the sudden interest in reconciliation. Despite recognizing the likely motivation behind Amanda's sudden desire to reconnect, I agreed to a video call the following evening. A small, stubborn part of me hoped that seeing each other's faces might rekindle genuine connection. Perhaps the financial request was secondary, an awkward addition to a primary desire to repair our relationship. At the appointed time, I settled on my sofa with a cup of tea and opened the video chat application. Amanda's face appeared on the screen, and my heart contracted at the sight of her. She looked tired, with fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago, but she was still my beautiful daughter. "Mom," she said, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You look different. Your hair is shorter." "Yes, I changed it about 2 years ago," I replied, not adding that I'd sent her a photo at the time which had gone unacknowledged. "It suits you. Portland seems to agree with you." I nodded. "It does. I found a good life here. How are you and Daniel? And the children?" She launched into a detailed update about 10-year-old Emma's soccer achievements and 7-year-old Tyler's trouble with reading. I listened intently, hungry for these details of my grandchildren's lives that had been withheld from me for so long. "They'd love to meet you," Amanda said, though she had made no move to call the children to the screen. "Maybe you could visit sometime. I'd like that very much. I've offered to visit many times over the past few years." Her expression tightened. "Well, things have been complicated. Dad's situation and everything. What about your father's situation would prevent you from seeing me?" She shifted uncomfortably. "It's not just that. We've had some financial challenges lately. Daniel's company went through layoffs last year, and he had to take a lower-paying position. And then Dad's support kind of dried up after the baby was born." "Ah, there it was." I kept my expression neutral. "I'm sorry to hear that. It must be stressful." "It has been, especially with the kids' activities and school expenses." She hesitated, then continued in a rush. "That's actually part of why I wanted to talk. Jack mentioned your amazing apartment, and we were wondering about your plans for it." "My plans?" "I plan to live in it. It's my home." "Right, of course. But it seems like such a large space for just one person, and so expensive. We thought maybe you might consider selling it and moving to something smaller. You could use some of the money for yourself and maybe help out your family with the rest." The casual entitlement in her voice was breathtaking. As if my home, purchased with my hard-earned money, was a family resource to be redistributed according to their needs. "Amanda, that apartment represents years of hard work rebuilding my life after the divorce. I'm not selling it." Her friendly demeanor slipped slightly. "Mom, we're really struggling here. Emma needs braces, and Tyler's tutor costs a fortune. Meanwhile, you're living in luxury all by yourself." "I earned that luxury," I said quietly, "through years of work and sacrifice. But we're family. Aren't you supposed to want to help your family? Your grandchildren? The grandchildren I've sent gifts to for years without so much as a thank you call? The grandchildren who don't know me because their mother decided I wasn't worth including in their lives?" Amanda's face hardened. "That's not fair. We were respecting Dad's feelings after the divorce. He was really hurt by how you handled things." "How I handled things?" "Amanda, your father left me for his 26-year-old secretary after 35 years of marriage. He hid assets, manipulated the divorce proceedings, and left me nearly destitute at 65. And you chose to believe his version of events without ever asking for mine. He said you were demanding an unreasonable settlement. Did you ever once think to ask me about that? To hear my side?" She looked away. "It was a difficult time." "Yes, it was, particularly for me, losing not only my husband but my children as well." "We didn't abandon you, Mom. You're the one who moved across the country. After 3 years of being ignored by my children despite constant attempts to maintain contact," I countered. "I have the texts and emails to prove it. Hundreds of messages sent, dozens of invitations extended, all met with silence or one-word replies." Before Amanda could respond, my phone rang. Jack's name flashed on the screen. "It's your brother," I told Amanda. "Would you mind if I add him to our call?" She agreed, and suddenly Jack's face appeared alongside hers in split screen. He looked more like his father than ever, with the same sharp features and assessing gaze. "Mom," he said with a nod. "Amanda told me you two were going to talk about the apartment situation. No greeting, no pleasantries, just straight to business." "There is no apartment situation, Jack. I have an apartment. I live in it. That's the entire situation." His expression soured. "Look, Mom, I'll be direct. Melissa wants to start an interior design business. We need startup capital. The equity in your apartment would make a perfect investment opportunity for you while helping your family at the same time." "An investment opportunity," I repeated. "In your wife's business venture." "Exactly. We've already lined up clients through my law firm connections. Several partners' wives have committed to hiring her once we launch. We just need the initial funding for a showroom space and inventory. The partners were really impressed when I showed them what we could do with the capital from your apartment sale." I blinked, processing what he'd just revealed. "You've already told people you have this money? Money from selling my home? Jack looked momentarily flustered. Well, I may have mentioned that we were expecting a significant family investment. The point is, this is a sure thing. Melissa has a great eye, and with my connections, the business can't fail. And what about my living situation? Have you given any thought to where I would live if I sold my apartment? He waved a dismissive hand. Portland has plenty of reasonable rental options for seniors. You don't need all that space anyway. It's wasteful. Wasteful, I echoed, feeling a strange calm settle over me as the last illusions about my children's motivations dissolved. Tell me, Jack, when was the last time either of you called just to check on me? To see how I was doing without wanting something? Silence from both screens. That's what I thought. 3 years of silence, broken only when you think I have something of financial value to offer. And you have the audacity to talk about family obligations. That's not fair, Amanda protested. We've been dealing with our own struggles. As have I replied. Rebuilding a life and career from scratch in my 60s, without the support of the children I raised and loved. But you wouldn't know about those struggles, because you never asked. Jack's expression hardened. If this is about emotional blackmail, Mom, it's not going to work. We're making a straightforward business proposal. No, you're not. You're demanding I sell my home to fund your wife's business venture, with no consideration for my needs or circumstances. That's not a business proposal. It's entitlement. So you're refusing to help your family? Your own grandchildren? Amanda's voice took on a wounded tone that might have moved me once, before I recognized the manipulation behind it. I'm refusing to be treated as a bank account rather than a mother. If you want to rebuild our relationship, I'm open to that. But it will need to be based on genuine connection, not financial transactions. Jack's face flushed with anger. Fine, keep your fancy apartment. But don't expect us to suddenly make time for visits and family bonding. We have our own lives and priorities. The naked transactionality of his statement confirmed everything I had feared. In their minds, a relationship with me was only worthwhile if it came with financial benefits. I understand your position completely, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice despite the pain squeezing my heart. Goodbye for now. I ended the call before either could respond, then sat in silence as tears finally came. Not just for this fresh rejection, but for years of loss and loneliness, for the family that existed only in my memories now. The morning after that devastating call, I woke with a clarity I hadn't expected. The pain was still there, a dull ache beneath my breastbone, but the fog of hope and denial had lifted. I could see my children clearly now, not as the loving son and daughter of my memories, but as the adults they had chosen to become. Adults who viewed me as a resource, rather than a person deserving of love and respect. I called Paula and told her everything. About Jack's demand that I sell my apartment, Amanda's attempts at emotional manipulation, and their transparent interest in my financial situation rather than reconciliation. I'm so sorry, Erika, she said, her voice tight with anger on my behalf. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I admitted. Part of me wants to write them off entirely. Another part can't let go of the hope that there's still something to salvage. You need to protect yourself first, Paula advised. They've shown they're willing to take advantage of you. Don't give them the opportunity. She was right, of course. Whatever steps I took toward potential reconciliation would need to be preceded by firm boundaries. I spent the weekend thinking about what those boundaries should look like, and how to communicate them effectively to children who had already demonstrated their unwillingness to hear me. On Monday, I took a personal day from work and began what I thought of as my fact-finding mission. I started by reviewing my communication history with both children, creating a spreadsheet of every text, email, and social media message I had sent since the divorce, along with their responses, if any. The resulting document was a damning record of my persistent efforts to maintain connection and their equally persistent indifference. Next, I turned to social media. Though neither Jack nor Amanda had accepted my friend requests in years, their profiles were public enough that I could see some of their posts. What I found was illuminating. Despite their claims of financial hardship, there were photos of luxury vacations, expensive restaurant meals, and designer purchases. Amanda's supposed struggle to afford her children's braces hadn't prevented a spring break trip to Hawaii 6 months earlier. Jack and Melissa's need for startup capital hadn't interfered with their purchase of a boat last summer. Most telling were the family gatherings documented in their photos. Holiday celebrations at Richard and Jennifer's home, summer barbecues, even casual Sunday dinners. All including both my children and their families, Richard and Jennifer, and their toddler half-brother, a complete family unit from which I had been excised. I sat back from my computer, absorbing the evidence before me. My children had not excluded me from their lives due to busyness or oversight. They had made a deliberate choice to align themselves with their father and his new family, while keeping me firmly on the outside. Until, of course, they thought I might be useful financially. With this painful knowledge came a strange sort of power. I was no longer operating under illusions or false hopes. I could see the situation clearly and respond accordingly. After some consideration, I decided to reach out to Richard directly for the first time since our divorce was finalized. I found his email address through his law firm's website and composed a brief, business-like message requesting a phone conversation about a family matter. To my surprise, he responded within hours, agreeing to speak the following day. When I called at the appointed time, Richard answered on the first ring. "Erika," he said, his voice neutral. "This is unexpected. What can I do for you?" "Hello, Richard. Thank you for taking my call. I wanted to discuss Jack and Amanda's recent communication with me." "Ah," he said, and I could hear understanding in that single syllable. "The apartment situation. They mentioned they were going to approach you about that." Of course they had discussed it with him first. The family unity extended to coordinating financial requests from the outcast mother. "Yes. I'm curious about your perspective on their request that I sell my home to fund Melissa's business venture." A heavy sigh came through the line. "Look, Erika, I told them it was inappropriate, but things have been challenging financially for all of us lately." "Challenging?" "Last I checked, you were a senior partner in one of the most prestigious firms in Boston. The firm has faced some difficulties. And with Jennifer and the baby, expenses are higher than anticipated. I've had to reduce the support I was providing to Jack and Amanda. So they decided I should fill the gap. They're exploring options," Richard said diplomatically. "I suggested they look into small business loans for Melissa's venture, but they seemed fixated on your apartment after seeing your sister's photos. For what it's worth, I think they were genuinely surprised to see you living so well. It didn't align with the narrative they'd constructed. The narrative that I abandoned the family to pursue selfish interests." A pause. "You've heard that?" "Yes." Imagine my surprise to learn that I'm the villain in the story of my own heartbreak. "Perspectives differ on how things ended between us," Richard said stiffly. "They do. But facts are facts, Richard. You left me for your secretary after 35 years. You manipulated the divorce proceedings to minimize my settlement. And you encouraged our children to side with you, cutting me out of their lives. I never told them not to speak to you," he protested. "But you didn't discourage it either. You were happy to be the center of their loyalty and attention, the primary parent, while I was relegated to obligatory birthday acknowledgments, if that." He didn't deny it. After a moment, he asked, "So what do you want from me now? I can't force Jack and Amanda to have a relationship with you." "No, but you could stop facilitating the family mythology that I'm the one who walked away. You could acknowledge your role in creating this situation, and you could advise our children that treating their mother as an ATM rather than a person is unacceptable." Another long pause. "I'll speak to them," he finally said, "but I can't promise it will change anything. They're adults with their own perspectives heavily influenced by yours," I pointed out. "Thank you for your time, Richard." After hanging up, I sat with the conversation, turning it over in my mind. Richard's admission of financial difficulties was surprising. He had always been so careful with money, so strategic in his career moves. What had changed? The obvious answer was Jennifer and their late-in-life child, but I suspected there might be more to the story. A quick Google search of Richard's firm yielded several recent news articles about a major malpractice suit and the departure of several key clients. Richard's name wasn't specifically mentioned, but it was clear the firm was facing significant challenges. Perhaps his financial situation truly was precarious, explaining both his reduced support to our children and their sudden interest in my assets. Not that it excused their behavior, but it provided context. They were reaching for any potential source of funds in a time of uncertainty. Unfortunately for them, I was no longer willing to be that source, not under these circumstances. Over the next few days, I formulated a plan. I would return to Boston for a brief visit, ostensibly to attend my college roommate's 70th birthday celebration. While there, I would request a face-to-face meeting with both Jack and Amanda. I would lay out my boundaries clearly and offer a path to rebuilding our relationship if they were interested. And if not, I would at least have the closure of knowing I had tried everything possible. I booked my flight and hotel, then sent identical text messages to both children. I will be in Boston October 15th through 17th for Diane's birthday. I would like to meet with both of you on the 16th to discuss our family situation in person. Please let me know if you're available. Jack responded first. We can meet at my office, 2 p.m. Amanda followed shortly after. Okay, where and when? I suggested a neutral location, a quiet cafe near my hotel, and they both agreed to meet at 3 o'clock. As the date approached, I prepared mentally for what promised to be an emotionally challenging conversation. Paula called daily with pep talks and reminders to stay strong. Remember, you hold the power now, she insisted. You've built a good life without them. They need to earn their way back into it, not demand entrance as a right. The evening before my flight to Boston, I received a disturbing call from Diane. Erika, the strangest thing happened today, she began. Amanda called me about the party. Amanda? How would she even have your number? Apparently, she looked up my agency online. She asked detailed questions about the party venue, saying she wanted to surprise you by attending. But then she started asking about your finances. Whether you'd mentioned selling your apartment, if you'd discussed estate planning. It felt off. My stomach tightened. What did you tell her? Nothing of substance. I said we mostly talk about grandchildren and book recommendations, which is true. But Erika, it felt like she was fishing for financial information under the guise of party planning. She probably was, I said, explaining the recent interactions with my children. That's awful, Diane sympathized. Do you still want to come to the party? I'd understand if you wanted to cancel the trip. No, I said firmly. I'm coming to celebrate with you, and I'm keeping that meeting with my children. It's time we had some honest conversation. The day before my meeting with Jack and Amanda, I received one final piece of disturbing information. A mutual friend called to tell me she'd overheard Jack at a restaurant, telling colleagues that his mother had agreed to sell her luxury apartment to invest in his wife's business. He was quite specific, my friend reported uncomfortably. Said the papers would be signed this week, and the funds transferred immediately. I thought you should know, since it didn't sound like something you'd do without mentioning it. Thank you, I said, a cold anger settling in my chest. You're right, I made no such agreement. Jack was attempting to force my hand through public pressure, creating a situation where I would look uncooperative if I didn't comply with the plan he'd already announced to his colleagues. It was manipulative and dishonest, and it removed any remaining doubt about how to approach our meeting. The cafe I'd chosen for our meeting was quiet in the mid-afternoon lull, with just a few patrons scattered among the tables. I arrived 20 minutes early, selecting a corner table that offered some privacy while still being in a public space. I ordered a pot of tea and waited, mentally reviewing the points I wanted to make. Jack arrived first, looking rushed and important in his expensive suit, checking his watch as if to emphasize how valuable his time was. Amanda followed 5 minutes later, offering a tentative smile as she slid into the chair beside her brother. Thank you both for coming, I began, keeping my voice level. I thought it was important we speak in person about recent events and our relationship going forward. If this is about the apartment, Jack started immediately. I've already spoken with a real estate contact in Portland who can handle the listing. We can make this very easy for you. I held up a hand. That's not why I'm here. I'm not selling my apartment, Jack. Not now, not ever, unless it's my decision based on my needs. His face darkened. Mom, we've been over this. Melissa's business opportunity won't wait, and the family needs this investment. By the family, you mean you and Melissa, I clarified. Not me, though it's my home you're so eager to liquidate. We're trying to build something for the future, Amanda chimed in. For the grandchildren you claim to care about. The grandchildren I've been prevented from knowing for the past 3 years, I corrected. The grandchildren whose birthdays and milestones I've marked with gifts and cards that received no acknowledgement. Those grandchildren? They exchanged uncomfortable glances. Look, I continued, I didn't come here to argue. I came to establish some truths and boundaries. First, I want to show you something. I took out my tablet and opened the document I'd prepared, turning it so they could both see the screen. This is a record of every attempt I've made to contact both of you since the divorce. 327 text messages, 94 emails, 68 voicemails, 32 cards and letters, 28 gifts sent to you and your children. And here, I scrolled down, are your responses. 46 texts, typically 1 or 2 words, 12 emails, 3 phone calls, all under 5 minutes. No invitations to visit. No phone calls on my birthday. Their expressions shifted from defensive to uncomfortable as they scanned the document. The narrative that I abandoned the family after the divorce is false, I stated firmly. I tried consistently to maintain our relationship. You chose to align with your father and exclude me. That was your right, but let's be honest about what happened. It wasn't that simple, Amanda protested weakly. Dad was hurt, and we were trying to support him. By completely cutting off your mother? By denying me access to my grandchildren? That goes well beyond supporting your father through divorce. You moved across the country, Jack pointed out, as if this justified everything. After 3 years of being treated as an inconvenient obligation by my children, I moved to pursue a career opportunity that has given me financial security and personal fulfillment. Something, by the way, that neither of you showed the slightest interest in until you saw the monetary value of my apartment. Both looked away, unable to deny the truth of my words. I have one more thing to show you, I continued, pulling up the social media screenshots I'd collected. Here are posts from both of your accounts over the past year. Hawaiian vacation, new boat, designer handbags, remodeled kitchen. All while you claim financial hardship so severe that I should sell my home to bail you out. Those were before Dad cut back his support, Amanda said defensively. Things are different now, perhaps, but it suggests a pattern of financial choices that don't align with your claims of desperate need. I put the tablet away. And Jack, I know you've been telling colleagues that I've already agreed to sell my apartment and invest in Melissa's business. That's not only false, but manipulative. His face flushed. I was being optimistic about the outcome of our discussions. You were attempting to pressure me through public commitment, I corrected. It won't work. I took a deep breath before continuing. Here's what I want you both to understand. I love you. You're my children, and nothing changes that. But I don't like the way you've treated me, and I won't accept it anymore. If you want me in your lives, it will be as your mother who deserves respect and consideration, not as a financial resource to be tapped when convenient. So you're refusing to help your family when we need it, Jack said bitterly. I'm refusing to be manipulated and used by people who haven't spoken to me in 3 years except to demand money, I clarified. There's a difference. What do you want from us? Amanda asked, her voice small. To pretend the past 3 years didn't happen? No. I want acknowledgement of what actually happened. I want apologies for the lies you've spread about me abandoning the family. I want genuine effort to rebuild our relationship based on mutual respect. And I want access to my grandchildren, not as a bargaining chip, but as their grandmother who loves them sight unseen. Jack stood abruptly. This is emotional blackmail. We're done here. He grabbed his coat and strode out without another word. Amanda remained seated, looking torn. He's under a lot of pressure, she said after a moment. Melissa's been pushing hard for this business launch, and with Dad cutting back support. That's not my responsibility to fix, I said gently. Your brother is an adult with a law career. If he's made poor financial choices or overextended himself, that's for him to address, not by pressuring his estranged mother to sell her home. She nodded slowly. I understand, and I'm sorry for not responding to your messages, for not making sure the kids acknowledged your gifts. It wasn't right. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of everything that had happened, but it was a start, a small crack in the wall of justification she'd built around her actions. Thank you, I said. That means a lot to me. I can't promise anything will change right away, she cautioned. There's a lot of water under the bridge, and Jack will be furious that I'm even talking to you like this. I'm not asking for immediate transformation, just openness to rebuilding something authentic between us, something that isn't contingent on financial transactions. She nodded again. I can try. For what it's worth, the kids have loved your gifts. Emma still sleeps with that purple elephant you sent for her birthday. My heart clenched at this small connection to the granddaughter I barely knew. I'd like to meet them someday, when you're ready. Maybe we could start with another video call? One where they actually participate this time. I'd like that very much. We parted with a tentative hug, the first physical contact we'd had in over 3 years. I returned to my hotel emotionally exhausted, but with a fragile sense of hope for at least one of my family relationships. 6 months passed. True to her word, Amanda arranged a video call with the children, who were shy at first but gradually warmed up as I asked questions about their interests and activities. We established a regular monthly call, each one becoming a little more natural and comfortable than the last. Jack maintained his angry silence for 3 months before necessity forced him to reconsider. Melissa's business venture had failed to secure other investors, and they had overextended themselves financially in anticipation of my contribution. He reached out with a stiffly worded email that stopped short of an apology but acknowledged that his approach had been perhaps overly direct. I responded with warmth but firmness, reiterating that I was open to rebuilding our relationship, but not to financial entanglement. After several more exchanges, he agreed to a phone call, during which he finally offered a grudging apology for the way he'd handled things. I still think you could have helped if you wanted to, he added, unable to fully relinquish his position. Perhaps, I conceded, but it would have been my choice to make, not an obligation to fulfill. That's the distinction that matters, Jack. Our reconciliation was slower and more tentative than with Amanda, but by the 1-year mark, we had established a monthly phone call of our own. He introduced me to my grandson Lucas via video chat, a serious 8-year-old with his grandfather's analytical mind, and, I was pleased to note, my own dimpled smile. 14 months after our confrontation in the Boston Cafe, I hosted a family gathering in my Portland apartment. Amanda and her children flew out first, spending 3 days exploring the city with me before Jack and his family joined us for the weekend. It was awkward at times, with old tensions occasionally surfacing, but we navigated them with more honesty than we had managed in years. On the final evening, as we all gathered on my balcony to watch the sunset over the river, Emma slipped her small hand into mine. I like your apartment, Grandma, she said simply. It feels happy. Thank you, sweetheart, I replied, squeezing her hand gently. I'm happy you're here to share it with me. Later, after the children were asleep, Amanda joined me on the balcony with 2 glasses of wine. Thank you for not giving up on us, she said quietly, even when we gave you every reason to. You're my children, I said simply. That doesn't change, even when the relationship does. I've been thinking a lot about what happened after the divorce, she continued. How quickly we accepted Dad's version of events, how easily we excluded you. I'm ashamed of that now. We all made mistakes, I acknowledged. What matters is that we're finding a way forward. A healthier way, she agreed. One where we see each other as people, not just roles or resources. In that moment, watching the city lights come alive against the darkening sky, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't expected to find again. The pain of those lost years would always be part of our family story, but it wasn't the end of the story. We were writing new chapters now, more honest and equal than what had come before. My journey from abandoned wife to independent woman had been painful but necessary. In losing what I thought was essential, I had found strength and purpose I never knew I possessed. And in standing firm in my own worth, I had created the possibility for relationships based on genuine love and respect, rather than obligation or advantage. Sometimes the greatest act of love is saying no, drawing the line that shows others how to treat you. And sometimes, the family you rebuild after devastation is stronger than the one you lost, precisely because it's chosen with clear eyes and open hearts, rather than assumed as a given. If you've ever felt taken for granted by those you love, or found yourself giving endlessly without receiving care in return, remember that you deserve relationships based on mutual respect. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's often the only way to create the possibility of genuine connection. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? What was the hardest part about standing your ground? Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to reclaim your worth. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to create the relationships you truly deserve.